This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The United States has a new health care reform law. The main goal is to insure about 32 million additional people. That is about 95% of Americans who are not already covered by Medicare, the government insurance program for older people. About 16 million people will be added to Medicaid, the government health plan for the poor. The law will require Americans to have health insurance, with a few exceptions, or pay a fine starting in 4 years. Also in 4 years, employers with more than 50 workers will have to offer their employees a health insurance plan. Employers will pay a fine for each uninsured worker. Smaller businesses will receive tax credits to help pay for health plans. People not covered by employer plans, Medicaid or Medicare, could buy health insurance in marketplaces called exchanges. The idea is that competition among plans will drive down costs. States will provide these exchanges by 2014. The law is the biggest change in American health care since 1965. But it is not a government-operated health care system like the ones in other countries. President Obama said it provides limited reform. He said, "This is not radical reform, but it is major reform." This legislation will not fix everything that ails our health care system, but it moves us decisively in the right direction. Barry Arbuckle is chief executive of the nonprofit Memorial Care Health System in Fountain Valley, California. He says the new law gets the issue of health reform moving. But he notes it is mainly health insurance reform. He says lawmakers will have to reform the way health care is provided. That means finding ways for hospitals, doctors, and other providers to work together more effectively. Mr. Arbuckle also would like to see more attention on prevention, so fewer people need costly medical treatment. The law is expected to cost about $940 billion over 10 years. However, the Obama administration says the plan will cut the nation's budget deficit by more than $100 billion during that period. Last year, the United States spent $2.5 trillion on health care. This was an increase of almost 6% from the year before. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. You can comment on our reports at our website, voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. The season for buying Christmas gifts was the busiest time for most stores and online retailers in the United States. Final numbers for the holiday season, including after Christmas sales, will not be known for a while. But a report on retail sales in November suggested that economic growth may be gaining speed. The Commerce Department said sales increased for the 5th month in a row. They grew by 0.8% over October. But the report came the same day the central bank said the economy is not growing fast enough to reduce unemployment. The jobless rate is nearly 10%. So, policymakers at the Federal Reserve voted to continue a program of buying government bonds. That program, launched in November, could inject $600 billion into the economy. The aim is to increase economic growth by lowering long-term interest rates. That would reduce borrowing costs for businesses and individuals. But long-term rates have risen since the Fed launched its latest program of so-called quantitative easing, known as QE2. One way to get a sense of how Americans feel about the economy is through retail sales. Consumer demand drives about 70% of the nation's economic activity. The National Retail Federation says its members employ 25 million people in the retail and services industry. Those businesses reported almost $2.5 trillion in sales in 2009. Terry Lundgren is chief executive of Macy's, the company that owns Macy's and Bloomingdale's department stores. He said retail and restaurants represent 1 in 5 jobs in America. So if we do well, then we're going to be the ones that will start to lead us into a recovery. The kinds of stores where sales are up also says something about the economy. Stores with the lowest prices do well in hard economic times. But the Retail Federation said at the end of November that discounters had fewer shoppers this year. Stores that sell jewelry and other higher-priced items have seen sales grow. Another change: Americans are less willing to buy on credit. Over 40% of holiday shoppers said they planned to mainly use debit cards instead of credit cards. Instead of borrowing money, debit cards take money directly from a bank account. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Small business entrepreneurs play an important part in American job growth. Small businesses have created almost 2/3 of new jobs in the last 15 years. The economy has traditionally been divided into 3 sectors. One is the private sector, meaning businesses. The second is the public sector, or government. And the third is the nonprofit sector. But now some people talk about a 4th sector. It represents nonprofit and for-profit organizations working toward goals of social change and environmental activism. Universities are starting to offer training and degree programs to prepare students to work in this area. One of these schools is Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. It now offers a degree in social entrepreneurship. Bernard Turner is director of the Center for Social Entrepreneurship at the university. He says student interest is driving many of these new programs. Students are saying, "Now I want to be an entrepreneur, but I want to do something that deals with a social problem or a social issue that's dear to me." William Paddock is founder and director of a business consulting company in Tennessee called WAP Sustainability. He has a business degree and training in the area of environmental sustainability. Recently, the custom packaging company of Lebanon, Tennessee, hired him to help make its business more environmentally friendly. The company makes cardboard advertising displays for sales campaigns. Mr. Paddock advised the company on recycling and ways to create less waste. He also persuaded the business to use electricity from solar energy. William Paddock offers his consulting services for profit, but says social responsibility is a big part of what his company does. For us, it's about protecting the environment, being better to society, but also there's an economic piece to it. We love to find our passions, but also save somebody money. There are now more than 60 American universities offering so-called green business degrees. The definition of social entrepreneurship and the exact nature of this sector continue to evolve. Some people are more interested in social programs and charity. Others are more interested in business plans and profits. But the root of the movement seems to be a desire to earn a living and make a difference at the same time. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can watch a video report on social entrepreneurship at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The American housing market is growing stronger. Yet, many areas are still suffering from the collapse of the market in 2008. Richmond is a small city in California. More than half of the homeowners there owe more for their home loans than the properties are currently worth. Such loans are risky for lenders since people in that situation often stop making payments. Now, city officials are moving forward with a plan to rescue these struggling homeowners. The city wants to buy the mortgages from banks for an amount equal to the current value of the properties. It plans to work with an investment company to help each homeowner get a new mortgage through government programs and private investors. City officials say if banks do not cooperate, they will force the lenders to sell the loans. Richmond plans to use the legal power called eminent domain. This allows officials to take a property, but requires the government to pay fair market value. State and local governments use this legal power to take property needed for public purposes, such as new roads, schools, or economic development. At least 2 banks are asking a federal court to intervene. They want the court to prevent the city of Richmond from using eminent domain. Lawyers for the banks say investors such as retirees would lose money. They also say the action would interfere with their contracts with investors. The United States paid billions of dollars to rescue banks during the world financial crisis. Now, the courts must decide if Richmond, California can help rescue homeowners through the power of eminent domain. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Recently, the United States Supreme Court decided a big case about political speech. Political speech is considered the most protected form of free speech under the Constitution. The case was Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. The question was this: with political speech, do corporations have the same rights as people? By a vote of 5-4, the conservative majority on the court decided yes. Companies, labor unions, and other organizations may now spend as they wish on independent efforts to elect or defeat candidates. The ruling is based on the idea in the United States and many other countries that a corporation is a legal person. Historian Jeff Sklansky says a slow shift to personhood for American companies began with a Supreme Court ruling in 1819. It said states cannot interfere with private contracts creating corporations. In the ruling, Chief Justice John Marshall described a corporation as an artificial being that is a creature of the law. The ruling was unpopular. It came as Americans resisted big corporations like the First Bank of the United States, chartered by Congress. Some states passed laws permitting themselves to change or even cancel corporate charters. After the Civil War in the 1860s, the 14th Amendment was added to the Constitution. It provides that no state may deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. If a corporation is legally a person, then states cannot limit corporate rights without due process of law either. At first, corporations were not fully recognized as persons, but Jeff Sklansky at Oregon State University says that changed. He said the general direction of the Supreme Court and the federal courts was to recognize corporations as persons with the same 14th Amendment rights as individuals. Yet corporations have a right that real people do not: limited liability. For example, a corporation can face civil or criminal fines, and individual lawbreakers can go to jail. But limited liability means the actions of a corporation are not the responsibility of its shareholders. Jeff Sklansky says the 19th century development of limited liability helped shape the modern corporation. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. Next week, more on corporations and the law.